Hello and welcome to today's edition of Route 664, The Road to Human Kindness. I'm Les Winston. I'm the host of this show, and I'm also the national spokesperson for the Endow America Network Foundation. And our objective is to endow America. And we need to do that through educating the public about 664 and the wonderful things that 664 can do, along with the other social charity devices. Social charity devices. Those are pooled income funds, charitable gift annuities, and charitable remainder trusts. We use 664 so that you'll get to know that number. That number is really important. That number is the entryway into the Internal Revenue Service's Internal Revenue Code, and it can help you find ways to reduce your taxes that are quite unique and very amazing, and you can do a lot of different things with them. One of the things we also want to do is to teach young people how to do this work, how to be prepared so that they can create their own endowments and they don't have to worry about anybody else trying to support them in the future. We can help them avoid anxiety and uncertainty of the future by getting them to understand how these wonderful devices can be used. They were created in 1969 by Congress, and unfortunately, a lot of people were left in the dark because nobody was able to explain these things to you. And now there is a way to explain them, and we're using this Route 664, The Road to Human Kindness, as a way to introduce you to these concepts. You can do a lot more things with your money if you don't have to pay tax. It grows faster and it's much more effective. The other thing about this process is it is a form of financial literacy. And we think that financial literacy is very important. My guest today is Garrett Gunderson. Garrett is an entrepreneur who became a multimillionaire by the age of 26. Garrett coaches elite business owners in financial services industry. His book, Killing Sacred Cows, was a New York Times bestseller and a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And he joins me now. How are you, Garrett?
I'm doing fantastic. Good to be with you. And I'm glad that you're teaching about this. I mean, charitable giving and charitable trusts and what that could do to essentially allow people to actually give away their money, but spend more because of it. And at the same time, you know, it's just really important for people to understand, especially early on, because if they don't know about it, then they find out when it's too late. They might have sold an asset that they could have avoided tax on that sale and benefited a charity after their death. But because they didn't know it, they just kind of, the money goes away in the government and not as efficient as giving to the charity of your choice.
Yeah, for sure. We want to stop government from giving to non-governmental organizations by replacing that with the way that they wanted it to be done, which was through the public, the private individuals doing their own charitable giving because it's beneficial to them and beneficial to the community. That's why we call it E squared. 664 equals E squared is an endowment for the individual first, and then an endowment that they leave behind. When they're done, and they're no longer here, they can leave that endowment. It's much better than Social Security, where you build an endowment, then you die and it disappears into the ether. So I'm fascinated by this wonderful book, I Am Money. And I don't grow on trees. Yeah, I think it's great. It was really difficult reading. It's really just a very simple way to get people to understand about money.
Right. I mean, as much as it's written for kids, I think adults will learn a lot just reading the book to kids, because it breaks it down in such simple manner. But investing in yourself and how does money work, and earning and spending and investing, and then ultimately giving, and so that's very aligned with what you're talking about here, and getting people to think about increasing their skill sets, and money's helpful for the basic things, but if you want happiness, it's beyond just the money. It's about value creation, and it's about a fulfilled life, and it's there's kind of putting money in its proper place.
Well, you kind of allude to something. I was being facetious before when I said it's difficult reading. It is very easy to read, and easy to read to youngsters. And I think every parent should be reading it to their youngsters, because the thing that most families don't talk about is money. They'll talk about everything else, but money is really usually kids are asking for it, and the parents don't want to tell them how much they have. So it's like,
yeah. And that creates a problem of, learning the same thing over and over again, because it's never shared, and not talking about difficulties and struggles, and then what money is and how it works. And that's why there's so many people that don't really understand the basics of it, is because it has been something that isn't talked about nearly enough. And for whatever reason, as a taboo topic, but by not talking about it, it leads to a pretty dangerous road of loss and frustration and all sorts of chaos.
So the end result of the youngsters learning about money is what?
Well, it's to understand like the value that they have in themselves, and that money is a byproduct of value creation. So if they could truly value themselves and understand who they are and develop their gifts and share those gifts with the world, that money follows that it chases that. And often people kind of sacrifice their life chasing money at the expense of who they are. And by trading their time for money or getting deep into debt far too often with consumer debt, and then, getting where they feel so frustrated, it becomes kind of a hopeless life in that situation. So I'm hoping that, I read something in The Economist way back in 2013, and it said, when they try to teach the topic of money in schools, kids end up worse off. And part of it's because it's not fun, and because they're not teaching them when it's relevant. So we're meeting kids where they're at in their mind, making it fun and enjoyable so it'll be memorable, and having them realize that they're their greatest asset. Not even a stock, bond, or piece of real estate that they'll learn about later on, but it's them. And if they truly invest in themselves and they know what their skills are, they'll be abundant enough that they could share, because it will be on their survival. They'll move into thriving and prosperity and abundance. And so that's really what the book's about, is helping them understand that it's not as complicated and finite and frustrating as most people would make it think.
There's a lot of fear in youngsters today, because I think they inherit that in some ways from their parents, because the feeling about it is always trepidation. Am I going to have enough money? Am I going to get enough money? Will I have what I need? And so on. But there's some interesting segues in your book. You talk about one of the things we do talk about, which is, reaching your genius. We want people to work at their genius. If they can work at their genius, they love what they do 24 hours a day, never get tired of it. And that's the most productive person out there. And if you can teach that to them in this method, kudos to you, because this is what we need desperately. Listening to what we're talking about here, we're dealing with the very essence of all of our focus in our lives, and really when we talk about money. And yet it shouldn't be, but it has become that because we've been trained that way. I think that's more where it's headed. Tell me a little bit about your story. Very interested to know how you were a millionaire very young. How did you do that?
Well, I didn't come from money. My dad was a coal miner. My grandfathers were coal miners. And even my great-grandfather, who traveled from Italy to America in 1913, he was a coal miner as well. And my parents were really dedicated to me and made sure that I never stepped foot in a coal mine. I've never even been in one. And I started this car detailing business when I was 15 years old, just washing and waxing cars, and won some competitions for the Rural Young Entrepreneur of the Year. It came with $500 when I took third place, $1,000 when I took first place. And then I won it for the state. It came with $5,000. And I thought that was a ton of money, because I'm a teenager. And I'm like, but I wanted to invest it. Like, I was fascinated in the concept of investing. My parents weren't really savvy about that. They didn't want to sign off as a custodian because they thought that was really risky. But when I was 18, I started asking around. I was in a fraternity, and I talked to people that had graduated before me that worked for banks and financial institutions. And so I just went down this road that after a year, I got offered an internship for Park Avenue Securities and Guardian. They were a mutual fund and life insurance company. And I kind of was a salesman the first couple of years. I was 19 years old, 20 years old. And then in the year 2000, the stock market started to dip. And that's when I don't know, I had a bunch of my family and my, aunts and uncles and stuff putting money in, and they moved out from double E bonds, which are really safe, into the mutual funds. And so the first 2 years, they thought I was a genius. And all of a sudden, when it was going down, they weren't too happy. And that's when I really got deep into finance. I traveled somewhere every month for 26 or 27 straight months, interviewing people, finding out what to do. And that's why I gained this fascination with how can people be efficient with their money, plug financial leaks, keep more of what they make without budgeting. And so it was about saving on tax, saving on interest, saving on non-performing investment fees, saving on duplicate coverages or improper structure with their insurances. And so I was able to boost their bottom line and have them invest back in themselves. What I learned was if they didn't invest back in themselves and they were overly reliant on things they had no control over, they never really felt prosperous and they never felt abundant. So we really focused on the individual and what would it be for them to create their richest life? What would have them enjoy life so that they never wanted to retire from it, where they felt fulfilled and did something I called living their soul purpose, SOUL purpose. And so that's where I really got my start and why I continue to do things now, but I'm using entertainment to educate. That's why a kid's book. I did a comedy special around money. I did a theatrical keynote. So I just know that there's a lot of people, billions are being entertained right now, but only millions are being educated. So I'm like, I'll use entertainment to reach more people. That's really my focus now.
That's excellent. So killing sacred cows was something like that, I guess.
Yeah, Killing Sacred Cows. I started writing it in 2005. A self-published version came out in 2007. And then it got published and hit New York Times in 2008. Really? And it hit right at a time the market started to collapse. And I was saying a lot about people who were overly reliant on a market they didn't control. They were deferring their taxes, not saving it, that they had no cash flow. And that there were these 9 financial myths that were really holding them back. And it hit kind of it hit a nerve in society. And I did a lot of media at the time, and the book did really well. The book's still selling 15 years later, basically, or 14 years later. And I still love the work that's in it, and it really resonates now more than ever.
Yeah, it comes back. We're cyclical. Anxiety in young people today is really becoming important. There's a lot of it. Why is that?
I think that one thing that's happening is we're skipping hard work. Like I mowed lawns when I was really young. I pulled weeds. I went and worked at an East Carbon dump site when it was 104 degrees. And it was very motivating for me to get educated in a way that would make me more productive. Not just get a college education, but say, what could I do? And what could I do that I would enjoy doing? And I toiled and tormented over what would be a fulfilling career and became an entrepreneur, even though that was a difficult path. I think that we've tried to shield our kids from far too much. And what's happened is they become a lot less resilient and they feel less confident and prepared for the world, which leads to a whole lot of anxiety because they've been on screens for too long and they're on connections with social media rather than actual people. And instead of families sitting down and having dinner together and having these conversations about their day and what was difficult and what they overcame, it's just kind of very separated and it's very fragmented.
Well, and the kids are all looking down. The kids are all looking down at their cell phones. It's like, and I think the parents are doing it too. Folks like yourself who can have an impact when you're reaching out and want to make the change happen, and you're putting out information that helps. That's a really important aspect of what we're going to do to change things. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to change quickly. Also, what do you think? Do you think kids should be relying on government for everything?
Well, I mean, if they what is the government in the first place? I mean, You mentioned Social Security. There's no money in it because as soon as it gets there, the government borrows it and spends it. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be a concern. Obviously, I love when I have these conversations with my kids about government and role of government and what's useful and what's not useful and what the process is. If we're ever going to be free as a society and as people, it's all about self-reliance and it's about responsibility. And then it's about adding value and serving others, but we've got to take care of ourselves first. If we think that someone else is going to take care of us, then what if they're not capable? What if they didn't learn responsibility? What if they didn't create skill sets? What if they're depressed and feel like they can't do anything? And unfortunately, we aren't as interdependent as we used to be. We've become the very few controlling the many because of that lack of responsibility or reliance on the government. I mean, if you want to see what happens on over-reliance of the government, I went to Vietnam. Northern Vietnam is very communistic, and you can just see it's just not as developed, and there's a lot of issues there. It's way worse in Cuba, from what I understand from people I've talked to that have gone to Cuba. But yeah, they promised free housing. They didn't promise it to actually keep water out when it's raining, and they didn't promise it to only be a couple people per square foot. It's who's going to do the work. And so I really want to make sure to instill in my kids a little bit of passion and purpose and to pursue their gifts and be of service, but make sure that they're not reliant on someone else. for their future or their prosperity.
So there are 4 things all kids need to know about money.
Yep. Earning, spending, saving, and giving. And saving and investing maybe be a little bit interchangeable within the book, but those are the 4 basic things, which helps us distill it down to something that's very simple and understandable. Instead of learning about derivatives or learning about, fractionalized banking or all that kind of stuff. It's just understand that money is a
you don't
tool.
You don't have to know every single thing about everything in order to be able to use it.
Right.
You need to start somewhere.
We all have it. There's just not very good instruction manuals of what to do with it. Right. So I'm hoping this will be a nice early, simple, straightforward instruction manual, because there's nothing I hate more than an instruction manual that's hard to understand. And I feel like there's a lot of confusion around this topic.
Well, we would like to add our 2 cents to the money, in the sense that the most important thing is to be able to give it away. But we want you to give it away when you can afford to give it away, and when you want to give it away because you have it to give away, not to give it away before you have everything else accomplished. So
yeah, and I think that's why you like the book. Is at the very end it says, when you take care of yourself, then you can do the coolest thing. You can share. Right?
Exactly. And that's the biggest picture in the book.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It said, you are your very best asset. If you become really good at what you love to do, you can make more of me than you'll ever need. And then you can do the coolest thing ever. You can share, right? That's what we got to, and that's what's going to allow for a better future. And hopefully navigate some of the chaos is responsibility and value creation that leads to service.
My guest is Garrett Gunderson, and he is a guide along the road to human kindness. And we appreciate very much the work that you're doing, and we hope that it becomes a very, very important bestseller amongst all parents, and they need to bring it to their kids and read it to their kids. In fact, they need to read it themselves because we have a generation that doesn't know much about money at this point. So thank you very much for joining us today on Route 664, the Road to Human Kindness. Garrett Gunderson.
Having me. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Take care. My guest is Dr. Luis Martinez. He is the medical director of a very interesting organization, Rebuilding Bodies, right?
Yeah, it's basically about looking for ways to restore function, fight aging, and just bring back health and wellness for patients. Not surgical approaches, minimally invasive. We use multiple different treatment approaches: hormone replacement therapy, intravenous nutrition, peptide therapeutics, xenotherapeutics, senolytics, nutraceuticals, and stem cells processes help turn back the clock and just make patients feel better. I think we're doing a lot of really great advances in longevity medicine. The clinic is called Body Rejuvenation. I mean, I think the name might be a little misleading because it's not only aesthetics. We do a lot of things internally to address cellular aging and really turn back the clock. So it's a combination of things that we do here. We do body contouring too. So we definitely do that aesthetic external approach. But again, we always try to combine it for maximum results.
Body Rejuvenation, helping you live a long and healthy life in Hallandale, Florida. BodyRejuvenationMD.com.
There we go. It's about healing and repair. So definitely internal, external, it goes hand in hand.
So I wanted to tell you, we just got a new mobile app. And that's why I've called you to tell more people, because now you can take us with you. We've got a new mobile app. And then they can listen to Classy Sunday. With me today is Michael Paxton of the Classy Sunday formality. Where are you right now? People are going to wonder.
Actually, I'm at my job. I just finished teaching the class. I teach Miami-Dade College. Not music, I teach English.
That's
it looks like I'm in a classroom. I am. I am.
It is. So it's only available on Android at the moment. Okay. I'm working speedily, hopefully, to get to the rest of the folks, our iOS folks of the iPhone family or gang. Well, it depends on how you want to look at it. But anyway, I wanted to talk to you a little bit because it's been a while since you've been on the program and talking about what's
sometime about a year ago.
Oh, it's been longer, I think, but that's all right. It's all good. Time flies when we're older, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
But I wanted to ask you, because I'm not sure that I know this. What was the first piece of classical music that you listened to, that you fell in love with, that started this career of yours?
Probably the Mozart Piano Concerto 21 in C. It has that beautiful middle movement, that andante, and which was used in a film, a Swedish film called Elvira Madigan, if you want to say that. It's a work I've certainly featured on my Mozart programs. It's very recognizable. And really my first exposure to classical music, I have to really credit my family, really credit my parents, getting me interested in classical music, taking me to the opera, taking me to concerts, my sisters too, going to those piano recitals. Didn't appreciate it at the time, but I do now.
Was that here in Miami?
Yes, here in Miami. I'm from Miami. I grew up in Miami. But of course, our audience is all over the world here.
I know, but I like to say hello to the home crowd if we can.
And of course, living family and living and going to the university in New Orleans. Okay, jazz is very special to me too. And so you want to get a good debate going. Where did jazz start? I say New Orleans. Some people may say Chicago or Memphis, but
really.
And so, but I was kind of a latecomer to classical music, quite frankly. My parents, they had opening night at the opera, which was then at the Miami-Dade County Auditorium, place we know well. Okay, we've been to a few times, and that is still there. But this was before the Arts Center, and the
Arts Center.
The first opera I saw was Tosca. That's kind of, I would just tell the audience, kind of a good introduction to opera. People might be turned off by opera hearing somebody singing Italian or French or something, German or whatever.
Beautiful. Oh, it's so beautiful.
It is.
So beautiful.
And don't go by the stories. Okay. This is where we get soap opera from. The plots of the operas, okay, they kind of have mistaken identity, a little plot twist at the end. But, it's really there for the music, the singing, the staging. And I do have a background through high school and the university in theater. So certainly appreciate the staging, the theater, the costumes, and all that. And so I went to the Opera Tosca many years ago, fell in love with opera, been a big opera fan. And truth be told, I have been in some opera productions here locally with what they used to call Greater Miami Opera, now Florida Grand Opera.
I think I've heard those rumors.
As a super, and yes, I'm super, you knew that. So a supernumerary, like an extra in a movie or a play or something, a non-singing role, believe me. But it was a lot of fun.
Do you have a favorite composer or a favorite
composer? That would probably be between Beethoven and Mozart. I love them both. I probably can give you a top 5 of composers that I like.
Now, when you go for the piece, are you looking for the orchestra or the conductor? Does it?
One thing when I'm selecting the pieces, you can have a symphony, and in one conductor, one recording is 30 minutes. Another one could be 25 minutes. Another one could be 35 minutes. I very much
what we call those the remixes.
yes, really. And then sometimes I try to have the live performances sometimes, and credit you for really putting this together every week. And credit you the technical.
My pleasure.
But
it's my heavy shot of dopamine. That's what I get that extra shot of dopamine. It's awesome.
Polo does the work. We know that. Polo does the work. But yes, I very much try to look. I do have some favorite soloists, pianists, violinists, conductors. When possible, I do try to play historic recordings. Okay, for violin, say Isaac Stern or something with Itzhak Perlman, who's still active. But I try to have the new performers too. I try to make it a mixture of live and then just studio recordings. But I certainly do have some favorite soloists, a favorite pianist, a favorite conductor, favorite violinist, etc. Certainly I do.
Well, classical music is timeless, but there's some great versions of old songs or old pieces, and then they're just brand new pieces that people are creating that's still classical. It's like it's not a dead art. Absolutely not. No, yes. There's a lot of new pieces being created. And one thing, I try to do, I've kind of done this more in the shows when I featured American music around the holidays, or special American holidays, is to have, pieces by 20th century American composers. I mean, this form goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, Yeah. And so,
I do try to feature works by new composers, and also, let's say, new, or let's say emerging conductors. A lot of the great conductors have either passed away or retired, and so we play those recordings. But I do try to play recordings featuring some new ensembles, but it's really with new soloists, new performers, new conductors, as well as new music. Excellent.
And speaking of which, what's coming up this Sunday?
This Sunday, we're going to do some music we're going to Bohemia, Czechoslovakia, Beatrix Smetana. We know him for The Bartered Bride. We'll have selections from The Bartered Bride. But what I'm really excited about for this week is he did a cycle of 6 symphonic poems. It's called Mavlast, or My Fatherland. Now, probably the best known piece is, we call it the Moldau. Okay, that's the German name.
Got it.
And about that river. And I feature that. My sister always says, "What's your theme this week?" And I do theme. Music about rivers. That was one of them.
I remember.
And whether it's the Moldau, Vltava, really in Czech. I have to work on my Czech pronunciations for this show coming up.
I think
or about the Mississippi. And one thing I've always tried to do, especially featuring music by African American composers, and who I don't think get the attention that they should. Okay. Yeah. And don't limit that just to special holidays or Black History Month. Florence Price is a good example. Mm-hmm. I played her Mississippi Suite just recently on our 4th of July show, and William Grant Still, who's sort of considered the dean of African American composers. And really to work in composers, but also conductors, artists, men and women. Try to feature women conductors. I mean, people tend to think it's a very male-dominated profession. Yes, maybe less so with violinists and soloists, but because there are certainly a lot of great women pianists, violinists, cellists, soloists. But the conducting,
I feel like the women play the string instruments more than.
Yes, very true. Very true. I mean, those wonderful violinists, Midori and Sarah Chang, Hilary Hahn, and cellists. Yeah, very much so with the string instruments. Probably more so with the string instruments than the piano necessarily. But there are a lot of great women pianists too. So, I try to have a combination of live recordings, studio recordings, newer recordings of something. And then sometimes, for example, I love orchestral music, and anyone who's heard the show knows I love orchestral music. I love symphonies. So I thought, okay, let's not just always play the orchestral version of something. Let's play. So a lot of pieces were originally written, say, for piano or something. A work I kind of traditionally play on the 4th of July by the American composer Charles Ives, who was an excellent composer. He was a part-time composer, his full-time job. He was in the insurance business. I don't know if he dealt with philanthropy and the charity, the type of work less. We
can only hope. They didn't have the 664 back then.
No, I don't think they did. I mean, this goes back more than 100 years. So
that's classical music for you. Yeah, I just wanted to find out what's going on with the show this week. Let you know about the new app and tell your friends.
Absolutely.
If they have an Android, just go to Google Store and download. Get the mobile app, the Route 664 radio mobile app. Save it for yourself. If you have an Android, you can get it.
And this is something I do promote with friends and students and all that, and around the country. And
excellent.
Anyway, so it's a fun thing to do, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. I really am, and I thank you for helping make it possible. I really do. I mean. Can
you do me a favor? Look up at the camera and wave.
Wait. Okay.
Up the camera. No, it's up here. It's up to your right.
Oh, it's up. It's over there. Okay. So bravo. So thank you, Wanda.
Right.
And a reminder of the show. We're on Sunday mornings. We're on Sunday mornings.
Sunday mornings at 8:00.
And then Tuesday evenings at 7
p.m.
On Sunday morning, maybe you're up, going to church or something like that.
If you're on the East Coast, so this is Eastern. Are we in daylight savings time now? I don't know. We'll go with Eastern time. So work it out.
But
there's an app for that.
And then there's such a great variety of music on Route 664 radio. So, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Okay. Bye. Wave to your audience up there.
Right. Okay. Thank you all.